I'm Marie. The candles were still flickering when my so-called mother, Diana, decided to shatter my world. It was my 28th birthday, and we were in a private room at Le Jardin, a fancy French restaurant. The whole family was gathered around a long, polished table. Diana lifted her champagne, flashed that fake, practiced smile she reserved for show, and declared, "It's time for the truth, everyone. We adopted you for the government subsidy. You were never truly part of this family." My sister, Lily, who was 31 and always thought she was the center of the universe, let out a cackle. My father, Henry, just stared down at his plate, his silence speaking volumes. What they didn't know was that in my coat pocket, folded neatly in a plain white envelope, I held a truth of my own. Minutes later, the smug expressions vanished from every face at that table. Let me rewind to earlier that evening. I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, as I always do. Being early gives me a sense of control in a world where I've often felt like an outsider. I'm a corporate lawyer in Cedarville. That means I spend my days poring over contracts that others skim through, and uncovering who really holds the power in business deals. I was wearing my best suit, and in the inner pocket was that white envelope I'd been carrying for 4 days, gathering the courage. Inside was a gift, not a trinket or a check, but a signed deed of transfer. After many sleepless nights, I'd decided that on my 28th birthday, I'd finally reveal a secret I'd kept for 6 years. I planned to hand my parents the deed to their beach house, free and clear, as a birthday present to myself, a hope that I'd finally be accepted as one of them. I remembered how I'd practiced what I'd say. Something simple like, "Happy birthday to me, and welcome to a real family." I touched the envelope through my coat and felt a glimmer of bravery. Then I hung my coat on the back of my chair, sat at the head of the table full of people who shared a surname I'd been given at 6 years old, and waited for the rest to arrive. I was 6 when the Andersons adopted me. I don't recall much from before. But I remember the after, a beautiful but cold bedroom that never felt like home. In the family portrait on the staircase, I always stood a bit to the side. They fed me, clothed me, and sent me to good schools, and I'm not going to deny that it meant something. But there's a vast difference between being raised in a house and being part of a family, and I learned that early on. Lily, with her sense of superiority, never let me forget I was an add-on. Diana had a way of introducing me. "This is Marie. We adopted her. Never just my daughter." I was always the footnote, the afterthought. The only person who ever made me feel like I belonged was my grandmother, Rose. She was my father's mother, a feisty old woman who smelled like lavender and had no patience for nonsense. She never once mentioned the word adopted. She called me her granddaughter, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, and she meant it. When I was 10 and crying in her kitchen because Lily had told me I was an outsider, Rose took my face in her hands and said, "You listen to me. You are the best thing that ever came into this family. Don't you ever let them tell you otherwise." She passed away when I was 20. I think about her every single day. That's why, when people wonder why a grown woman would secretly buy her family's house and keep it a secret for years, the answer starts with a lavender-scented kitchen and a woman who believed in me before anyone else did. 6 years ago, my parents were on the verge of losing everything. My father, Henry, had invested most of their savings in a failing tech startup. On top of that, Diana had a serious back injury that led to huge medical bills. The beach house where I'd spent my childhood summers was about to be foreclosed on, and they were too proud to ask for help. I found out through my work. I was sitting at my desk one Thursday when I saw the property notice for their beach house on the auction list. I could have called them and offered to help, but I knew how it would go. Diana would rather have faced financial ruin than accept charity from the adopted daughter. She would have turned it into a story about how I thought I was better than them. So, I made a different choice. 2 years before that, I'd set up a small investment company, a single-member LLC with a name that had nothing to do with the Andersons. When the auction came, my company was the buyer. I put down all my savings and took out a mortgage in the company's name. Then, I had a property manager I trusted reach out to my parents. He told them an investor had bought the house and wanted to keep good tenants. He offered them a lease for $1 a year, framing it as a tax write-off to save their pride. Diana was overjoyed. She boasted about having such a wonderful landlord. "We've got the most amazing deal. It just shows that if you live right, things work out." I heard her say that at Christmas and had to leave the room because I was that amazing deal. A year after I bought the house, Henry had a heart attack. Their insurance covered only part of the cost. I found out through Lily, who mostly called to complain about how stressful it was for her. The hospital needed a large sum of money up front, or the surgery would be delayed. So, I called the hospital's billing office and paid the balance anonymously, listed only as a private benefactor. Henry survived, and he was sitting at this birthday dinner breathing because of a check he didn't know I'd written. He never asked who paid. I think a part of him didn't want to know because it would mean owing me. Henry had spent his whole life avoiding owing me anything. Before the cruelty started at the restaurant, I overheard Diana and her sister, Carol, talking. Carol was praising my parents for keeping the beach house through tough times. Diana, beaming, said, "We did it ourselves. Nobody handed us anything. You just have to work hard and keep what's yours." I stood there in my suit, with the deed to that very beach house close to my heart. I felt the old pain and a new determination. I was tired of being the invisible support for this family while they took all the credit. So, I decided that tonight, I'd tell them. As the dinner went on, Lily arrived with her husband, Mark, a man who always agreed with whatever Lily said. She gave me a fake air kiss and eyed my suit. "Is that new? It must cost a fortune. Lawyer money, huh?" she said, with a sneer. A few cousins, an uncle and a family friend, Tom, who'd known my parents for ages, joined us. There were about 12 of us in that warm, elegant room with the soft, lit candles. They sang happy birthday to me, but there was a strange loneliness in it. People couldn't quite look me in the eye as they sang. I sat there with my hands in my lap, the envelope a short distance away in my coat, and forced a smile. Lily spent the first half hour talking about her latest shopping sprees, her new car, and the vacation she and Mark were planning. Every now and then, she'd throw a snide comment my way. "Still single, Marie? You work too much. But someone has to, I guess." Diana watched it all with a satisfied look, as if Lily's performance was a testament to her parenting. I told myself to hold on. After dinner, I'd hand them the deed, and all these years of small cruelties would be forgiven. But I had no idea Diana was about to change everything. Around the main course, Diana started telling the adoption story. She did this at family gatherings when she'd had a couple of glasses of wine and wanted to seem generous. It was a story I could recite by heart, how they hadn't planned on a third child, how they'd taken me in during a difficult time, and how it was the right thing to do. She always told it as if I were a stray she'd rescued, and she always told it while I was sitting right there, as if my feelings were irrelevant. "We did a good thing taking her in," she said to the table, patting Carol's hand. "Not everyone would. People don't realize how much it costs to raise a child who isn't really theirs." I felt the hope in my coat pocket start to fade. This wasn't the warm, loving table I'd imagined when I rehearsed my speech. This was a table being prepared to see me as a burden. Lily, who could never keep a secret when she'd had a drink, leaned over to Mark and said loudly enough for half the table to hear, "It's so funny. Miss High-powered lawyer," and meanwhile, Mom and Dad almost lost the beach house, and she didn't do a thing. I kept my face calm. "I helped where I could," I said evenly. Lily snorted. "Sure, by sending a card." She had no idea. To her, I was the useless adopted sister who'd done nothing while our heroic parents saved the day. I realized then that Lily needed me to be a failure. Her whole sense of self-worth in the family depended on me being beneath her. If it ever came out that I was the one who'd saved the beach house, her world would fall apart. My father, across the table, wouldn't meet my eyes. I knew there was something more to his silence. The envelope in my coat was the key to this whole night. It wasn't a weapon when I packed it. It was a properly drawn up, signed, and notarized quitclaim deed, transferring full ownership of the beach house from my holding company to Henry and Diana Anderson for the sum of $1 and natural love and affection. I'd typed those words myself and felt a lump in my throat. I'd also included an old birthday card from Rose. It was her last one to me, the year before she died. I'd brought it for courage, planning to read her words when I handed over the deed, to explain why I'd done it all. As the dinner got more and more unpleasant, I kept my hand near my coat, arguing with myself. Part of me, the part that had learned to read this family's moods over the years, was warning me. Don't do it. Not tonight. They're being cruel. Save the deed and your dignity. But another part of me, the hopeful part, kept saying, maybe this is the moment they'll finally see you. Carol, Diana's echo, decided to add fuel to the fire. You know what they say? Blood is blood. You can love an adopted child, but it's not the same. There's a bond you can't create. She gave me a sickly smile, as if she were sharing wisdom. A few people chuckled uncomfortably. Mark nodded because Lily did. And Diana looked pleased, as if Carol had just put me in my place. I felt a cold, hard realization settle in my chest. The hope was gone. I saw clearly that these were people who had long ago decided I was just a means to an end. My father's silence was deafening. I started to notice that his avoidance wasn't just discomfort, it was fear. Every time the conversation touched on the beach house or money, he flinched. I realized that he knew. Maybe not everything, but he'd put some pieces together. He'd signed that $1 lease and seen the heart surgery paid for by a mysterious benefactor. He'd chosen to stay silent, letting Diana treat me like a charity case while he knew the truth. When his eyes finally met mine for a brief second, I saw guilt. He looked away first. That was the moment I decided I was done being silent. Before the cake came out, I excused myself to the restroom and took my coat with me. I needed a moment alone with the envelope. I stood at the sink and opened it. The deed was there, crisp and official. My signature, the notary's seal, and my parents' names. $1 and natural love and affection. I read those words and felt how naive I'd been. Behind the deed was Rose's card. I opened it, as I'd done so many times since her death, and read her shaky handwriting. Happy birthday to my dear granddaughter. You are the best thing that ever happened to this family. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. All my love, always, Grandma. I stood there and let the emotions wash over me. The little girl who never quite fit in, the secret landlord, the anonymous benefactor. And Rose's voice, reaching across the years, telling me I belonged. I made a decision. I wasn't going to give them the deed as a gift. They hadn't earned it. But the truth in that envelope was going to be revealed. I slid Rose's card into my pocket, kept the deed in the envelope, and walked back to the private room with a steady heart. The cake was on the table, 28 candles burning. Diana was clearly waiting for me. She had that look she gets when she's about to make a grand statement. She let me sit, let the candles burn down a bit, then picked up her spoon and tapped it against her wine glass. 3 clear rings cut through the chatter, and all eyes turned to her. Before we cut the cake, she said, I want to say a few words. It's a special birthday, 28 years. She smiled around the table, soaking up the attention. Lily was grinning, as if she knew what was coming and that it would be bad for me. Carol folded her hands. Mark took out his phone to record. Henry set down his fork carefully, his shoulders tensing. I sat with the envelope in my lap, my fingers resting on it. I walked in expecting the worst, but still, a small part of me hoped. Maybe Diana would be kind. Maybe 28 was the magic number that would soften her. Then Diana smiled wider, raised her glass to me, and said, "Now that Marie is 28, I think it's time we were honest. We adopted you for the government subsidy. You were never really one of us." The room went silent. It was the kind of silence that follows a shock. Lily laughed out loud, delighted. Mark kept recording. Carol hid a smirk behind her napkin. One of the cousins let out a small gasp. Henry closed his eyes. It hurt. It hurt like the deepest wound. All those years of feeling like an outsider, distilled into one cruel sentence. But I didn't break. I got very calm, the way I do in a tough negotiation. As that sentence landed, I felt my hands go still on the envelope. I didn't react the way they expected. They probably wanted tears, a scene. But I sat still and let the silence stretch. The longer I sat there, the more uncomfortable the room became. Lily's laugh died in her throat. Carol's smirk faded. Tom stared at Diana with disbelief. I waited a few more seconds, then picked up my napkin, dabbed my mouth, and stood up. The candles were still burning. I looked around the table at the people who shared my last name and felt a new kind of power. I was the only one who knew what was about to be revealed. I could have walked away. It would have been easy and maybe even smart. I could have left the restaurant, taking my secret and the deed with me. But I thought of Rose's card in my pocket. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I couldn't let Diana's words be the last word. I stood up taller, held the envelope where they could see it, and looked at Diana. You said you adopted me for the government subsidy. That's a strange thing to say. There's no ongoing subsidy for adoption. It's a one-time credit, and you'd have claimed it 6 years ago when my adoption was finalized. Maybe $20,000 at most, and only if your income qualified. That was a long time ago. So, if you took me in for the money, it was a terrible investment because raising a child costs far more than $20,000, and you've spent years telling everyone what a sacrifice it was. The truth is, you just like saying it to make me feel like a transaction. Diana's mouth opened and closed. She'd expected tears, not a calm correction. I continued, but you wanted to talk about truth? I have some truth, too. Who do you think owns your beach house? Diana was taken aback. What kind of question is that? We own it. We kept it through hard work, no thanks to. She caught herself and glanced at me. I repeated, you kept it through hard work. That's the story you've been telling. But the truth is, 5 years ago, that beach house was about to be foreclosed on. I found out through my work and bought it quietly through my company. I leased it back to you for $1 a year because I knew you'd never accept help from me. And when Dad had his heart attack, I paid for his surgery anonymously. I laid the deed on the table, face up, in the candlelight. I showed them the tax records and the hospital statement. Henry was in tears, his cowardice finally exposed. Diana sat there, frozen, trying to deny the evidence in front of her. I looked at Diana and said, you said I was never one of you. But for 6 years, I've been the one keeping this family afloat. You've been living under my roof, and you've been taking credit for something I did. I came here tonight to give you the beach house as a gift, hoping to finally be part of this family. But you used my birthday to humiliate me. So, no, you won't be getting the house as a gift. The truth is here, whether you like it or not. The room exploded. Diana was furious, shouting about how ungrateful I was. Carol joined in, calling it a disgrace. But I stood there, calm, as the family finally saw the truth. The next morning, I had my lawyer send my parents a formal letter. They could stay in the beach house, but on a fair market lease. I kept the deed. A week later, Henry called me. He finally admitted that he'd known for 2 years and that his silence was the worst.